In the quiet heart of Montana's Bitterroot Valley, a weathered photographer pulls over on a foggy mountain road, only to lock eyes with a wounded predator and her defiant cub. What begins as a photo opportunity spirals into a life-altering rescue mission, one that tests the limits of survival, loyalty, and love. Why would a wild bobcat cub risk everything to stay by its injured mother's side? And what would drive a grieving man to get involved? What they build together will move millions. This isn't just a story about animals. It's a story about us. The last light of Bitterroot. Michael Harris hadn't planned on stopping that morning. He was already an hour behind schedule, the chill of dawn creeping through the seams of his old Ford truck as he coasted along a gravel road deep in Montana's Bitterroot Valley. The autumn sun had just begun its slow climb, casting a golden haze across the mountains, and thin mist clung to the pines like breath frozen in midair. He adjusted the brim of his faded ball cap and reached for the camera resting beside him on the passenger seat. His trusted Nikon with a cracked lens ring. This trip, he had told himself, was about closure, about documenting the wild one last time before hanging up his career and returning to a quiet cabin life in Missoula. At 63, Michael looked every bit the seasoned field photographer, broad-shouldered but lean, his skin tanned and weathered like old leather, his beard more salt than pepper. His piercing blue eyes, once vibrant with curiosity, now carried the weary shadow of someone who had seen both too much and not enough. Ever since losing his wife 2 years ago to a brutal cancer, his work had lost its color. The wilderness that once healed him had grown strangely silent. But this morning, something tugged at him. As he rounded a curve near the edge of a remote wildlife corridor, his headlights flashed across a shape in the road. He instinctively braked. At first, he thought it might be debris or maybe roadkill, but as the truck slowed to a halt, he caught sight of a faint, twitching movement. He stepped out, boots crunching frost-laced gravel, camera slung over his shoulder more from habit than intention. There, just off the shoulder, lay a full-grown bobcat, a female, judging by the size and body shape. She was badly injured, her hind leg twisted unnaturally, and deep lacerations marred her side. Blood had soaked into the fallen pine needles beneath her. And yet, what struck Michael the most wasn't the extent of her wounds, but what was lying next to her. A juvenile bobcat, maybe 8 months old. Smaller, but with the same tawny fur dusted with black spots, white chin, and that characteristic bobbed tail. His coat shimmered faintly in the morning light, but his amber eyes were what froze Michael in place. The cub wasn't afraid. He wasn't fleeing, hiding, or crying out. He was curled against his mother's neck, body low and tense, eyes locked onto Michael with a fierce, primal protectiveness that seemed to challenge even the cold. His front paw rested gently over her ribs, as if to say, "She's mine. Don't come closer." Michael, his breath caught somewhere between awe and heartbreak, lowered himself to one knee. He didn't know it yet, but the moment his gaze met that cub's, everything was about to change. The eyes that held the wild. Michael didn't dare move closer. He knew better. 30 years of photographing wildlife had taught him that sometimes the most dangerous thing in nature wasn't teeth or claws, but devotion. The cub's posture said it all. Ears flattened, spine slightly arched, muscles coiled like a spring wound tight. He wasn't leaving his mother, not for a human, not for anything. Michael sat back slowly on the cold gravel, giving the cub space. From this distance, he could see that the mother bobcat was still breathing, barely. Her chest rose and fell in uneven rhythm, and when the wind shifted, Michael caught the unmistakable scent of blood and wet fur. He pulled out his camera, not to shoot for beauty, but for proof. He needed to document the injuries. His fingers trembled slightly, both from the cold and the heaviness of the moment. The shutter clicked in low, muted bursts. Through the lens, he zoomed in on the cub's eyes, burning amber, watchful, and impossibly expressive. That's when the cub did something that unmoored Michael. He leaned forward and licked his mother's cheek, not in panic or desperation, but with a kind of gentle insistence. Then he nuzzled against her ear, as if trying to wake her. Her head lolled, unresponsive. The cub made a soft, guttural sound, half growl, half whimper, then turned his glare back to Michael. It wasn't just protection. It was grief. It was fear. And it was unwavering love. Michael exhaled, nearly forgetting he'd been holding his breath. He turned off the camera and reached slowly for the satellite phone in his coat pocket. Cell signal was useless out here. But the Bitterroot Wildlife Rescue Center, 30 miles northeast in Missoula, was programmed into his emergency contacts. When the line connected, he kept his voice low but firm. "This is Michael Harris. I've got an injured adult bobcat, badly hit, and a juvenile refusing to leave her side. Location is near mile marker 21 off East Skolcajo Road. Send a team. Fast." He gave the details, coordinates, and a brief assessment of the situation. The woman on the other end promised a response unit within the hour. Then the line went dead. Michael looked back at the scene before him. Cars might have sped past without ever noticing. A predator and her cub, tucked beneath the brush, fading quietly into a morning most people would never see. But Michael had stopped, and as the mist began to lift, revealing more of the valley around them, the cub never flinched. He stayed there, guarding his mother with a dignity that felt impossibly human. Michael wrapped his arms around his knees and waited. This was no longer just about photographs. This was about bearing witness. Between instinct and intervention. The morning sun had risen a little higher by the time the rescue team's white pickup truck rumbled up the gravel road. A cloud of dust trailed behind it, dissolving into the pines. Michael stood as the doors opened and two figures stepped out, their movements efficient and calm despite the tension in the air. Dr. Eva Moreno moved first. In her late 40s, with her black hair tied in a tight braid beneath a field cap, she had the demeanor of someone who'd seen the wilderness at its worst, and still chose to serve it. Her eyes scanned the scene, missing nothing. Beside her was Lucas Green, a field biologist in his 20s, his beard scruffy and jacket patched in a dozen places. He carried a dart rifle across his chest. Michael pointed toward the brush. There just over that ridge, about 50 feet down, tucked against the slope. Eva crouched low with her binoculars, peering through the trees. "Adult female," she muttered. "Wounds on the flank. That leg's shattered." Her tone turned sharp. "She won't survive another night out here." Lucas nodded. "And the cub? 8 months, maybe. Still dependent. Unusual for one that age to stay this close." Michael added quietly. "He hasn't moved from her side. Not once." They knew what that meant. Wild bobcat juveniles usually begin establishing their own range by this age. But this one had dug in like a soldier. Protective. Refusing to flee even as humans drew near. Michael looked toward Eva. "If you dart one and not the other." "Exactly," she said. "It's got to be simultaneous." Lucas knelt beside his case, loading 2 tranquilizer darts with practiced hands. Eva adjusted the dosage for the cub, enough to bring him down safely without harming his smaller frame. Timing would be everything. If the mother felt threatened before sedation, she might lash out. If the cub panicked, he could vanish into the brush, never to be found again. The weight of it pressed down on all 3 of them. Michael moved back, out of the firing arc. He raised his camera one last time, not for art, but to document what might be their final moments together. Through the lens, he watched as the cub stood over his mother, body tense, tail low, every fiber alert. Then Eva gave the signal. 2 soft hisses echoed in the trees, nearly simultaneous. The mother jerked slightly, then collapsed. The cub flinched and turned, eyes wide. He gave one strangled growl, then staggered toward her with wobbling limbs. With the last of his strength, he pressed his head into her fur, and fell asleep, his paw still draped over her leg. Silence followed. A moment suspended in reverence. Lucas exhaled and slung the rifle across his back. Eva moved in with surgical precision, checking vitals, calling out numbers. But Michael didn't move. He just stood there, heart pounding. Not from fear, but from something far older. A sense that he'd just witnessed the very edge of instinct, and the beginning of something deeper. Beyond the wild within. They were rushed to the Bitterroot Wildlife Rescue Center, a facility nestled in the pine-covered hills on the edge of Missoula. Though modest in size, it was one of Montana's best-equipped rehab centers for native predators. The medical bay smelled of antiseptic and pine cleaner, and every corner hummed with quiet urgency. Willow, the name Eva had given the injured female bobcat, was taken straight into surgery. Her right hind leg was splintered in 3 places, and internal bruising suggested she'd been clipped by a speeding vehicle. She'd likely dragged herself off the road and into the brush, clinging to consciousness just long enough to reach her cub. The pain must have been unbearable. Meanwhile, the juvenile, now called Cedar, was placed in a quiet exam room. Physically, he was unharmed, though a little underweight. The real trouble began when the sedative wore off. He woke with a raw, panicked screech that echoed through the building. His body slammed into the cage bars. He paced, snarled, then let out a cry, somewhere between a yowl and a call, that made even the staff freeze. He wasn't just agitated. He was grieving, calling out for someone, for her. Cedar refused food, refused water, ignored the calming sounds pumped in through hidden speakers. He kept his face pressed to the wall, his tail flicking in jerks, his breathing shallow and fast. It was Eva who suggested the unorthodox solution. "Move him near her," she said. "We won't let them interact. Just let him smell her. See her." It wasn't standard protocol. Young predators could imprint further on humans if their rehabilitation wasn't carefully managed. But Eva knew this wasn't a typical case. Michael, who had returned to the center to help document the process, stood by in quiet support. So they placed Cedar's crate just outside Willow's recovery room, separated by one-way glass. Willow, still under anesthesia, couldn't see him. But Cedar could see her, and the effect was immediate. The pacing stopped. The cries subsided. Cedar crouched low, his head resting against the side of the crate closest to her. When the staff slid in a bowl of soft meat, he hesitated, then began to eat, eyes never leaving the space where his mother lay. The staff was stunned. Even Lucas, usually reserved and methodical, muttered, "That's not normal." Cedar began showing behavior that challenged everything they knew about bobcats. He paced not out of distress, but like a sentry. Every time a staff member approached Willow's recovery area, he would watch, alert, tail twitching in warning. When Eva knelt to change Willow's for, Cedar pressed himself to the crate's front wall, growling low in his throat. Protecting. Always protecting. Michael captured every moment. These weren't just images. They were testimony. The tenderness in Cedar's eyes. The way he pushed his food close to the barrier, as if trying to share it. The haunting stare through the glass. The photos, once posted to Michael's modest online blog, spread like wildfire. Within days, conservation groups, animal lovers, and even school teachers were sharing Cedar and Willow's story. Donations poured into the rescue center. Letters from children arrived with crayon drawings of bobcats and messages like, "Thank you for saving them," and "Cedar is my hero." But what fascinated Eva the most wasn't the public reaction. It was the science. She'd studied lynx and bobcat behavior for years. Juveniles were expected to be fiercely independent by the 8-month mark, often challenging even their mothers. But Cedar displayed advanced social sensitivity, emotional regulation, and prolonged attachment, traits rare even in more socially complex species. "He's adapting," Eva said softly one evening, watching Cedar from behind the observation glass. "Not just surviving, but choosing love over instinct." Michael, camera lowered for once, replied, "Maybe love is instinct. We've just forgotten that." In that sterile hallway filled with wires, monitors, and quiet beeps, something wild and beautiful was happening. Not just the healing of two animals, but the reframing of what we believed about them. Whisper Hollow. A place to begin again. Willow's surgery was a success, but her prognosis wasn't promising. Though the titanium plates in her leg stabilized the fractures, her mobility would never be the same. She could walk, limping and slow, but not hunt effectively or scale trees to escape threats. In the wild, that meant a death sentence. And Cedar, despite being physically healthy, was unprepared for independent life. He hadn't learned critical hunting or survival skills from Willow in those crucial early months. Keeping them both caged wasn't an option. That's when Eva proposed something bold, a semi-wild enclosure, tailored for their needs. "We call it Whisper Hollow," she said, pulling up the site map on her tablet. 10 acres of forested land on the east slope of Lolo National Forest. Enclosed but untamed. No artificial lighting. No unnatural surfaces. Just enough infrastructure to monitor and support, but otherwise it's their world. Michael leaned in, scanning the topography. Hills. Streams. Fallen logs. Real terrain. Real wild. Willow gets her freedom, Eva added, and Cedar gets his lessons. It was a compromise of nature and nurture. Cedar would undergo structured wild training, hunting small prey, navigating terrain, responding to predators, while Willow lived freely but safely in the same habitat. She wouldn't be able to teach him to hunt, but she could offer what she always had: presence, stability, love. The center poured resources into building the space. Volunteers cleared invasive brush. Wildlife architects installed over a dozen wildlife cameras hidden throughout the enclosure. Feeding stations were disguised in natural wood. Logs were hollowed for dens. A small stream, once blocked by fallen debris, was restored to flow naturally again. Michael documented every step. He photographed Cedar watching from a transport cage as the sanctuary took shape. Willow limping through her first cautious steps on soft soil. The wind rustling through the pines above them, like breath after holding too long. When the day finally came to move them in, it was quiet and overcast. No crowd. No ceremony. Just the soft rumble of the transport truck and the creak of the gate as it swung open. Cedar stepped out first. Tail low, ears twitching. He sniffed the air, tasted it, then turned back toward the crate, waiting. Willow emerged slowly, her body stiff but dignified. Her golden eyes scanned the trees, then rested on her cub. He brushed against her flank, and together they disappeared into the trees. Whisper Hollow wasn't perfect, but it was wild, and it was theirs. The rhythm of wild hearts. At first, Cedar didn't stray more than 20 feet from Willow. Every time she lay down to rest, often on a sun-warmed rock or nestled beneath a fallen pine, he circled her like a watchful sentinel. Wildlife cameras captured him pacing the perimeter at night, ears perked, posture alert. The instinct to protect her had not waned, even in this safer space. Willow, for her part, adjusted slowly. Her limp was permanent, but she moved with a kind of dignified rhythm, adapting to the terrain with caution and grace. She hunted when she could. Small voles, field mice, occasionally a ground squirrel, but the center supplemented her meals discreetly, placing them in naturally hidden spots so she could still use her skills. Meanwhile, Cedar's world was expanding. With each week, he ventured farther, curious, confident. Trainers released live prey in designated zones of the enclosure: rabbits, birds, and rodents. At first, Cedar was clumsy. He'd pounce too soon, misjudge wind direction, or step on dry twigs that alerted his target. But then, he learned. One afternoon, a hidden camera recorded him stalking a hare for nearly 40 minutes before making a clean, efficient kill. Eva and Lucas watched the footage in stunned silence. "He's improvising," Lucas said. "Learning faster than we expected." Eva nodded. "Because he knows what's at stake." Michael returned often, hiking to a distant observation post just outside the enclosure. From there, using a long-range lens, he captured moments no one else saw. Cedar leading the way, glancing back to check on Willow. Willow lounging in the sun while Cedar crouched low in the grass, eyes tracking a bird overhead. There was no narration. Just still images, mother and son existing in quiet tandem. Michael's journals became filled with notes not just about behavior, but about something harder to define: connection. "These are not instincts," he wrote. "These are choices. Cedar is choosing her. Again and again." As autumn deepened, the golden leaves framed each movement like a painting. Cedar, now nearly full-grown, was stronger, sleeker, his eyes sharper. But whenever he returned to Willow, his posture softened. He'd nuzzle against a cheek, or curl beside her in the same way he had on that roadside months ago, always with one paw draped gently across her shoulder. Eva watched these interactions in awe. "This," she said one day, "this is rewriting what we thought we knew about bobcats." But Michael said nothing. He only raised his camera, because some truths, he believed, were too powerful to be spoken. They had to be seen. The distance between letting go and losing. Winter was approaching. The golden leaves had thinned, leaving branches bare and air sharp with frost. Whisper Hollow, once humming with late summer life, grew quieter with each passing week. The creeks slowed. The prey grew scarce. And Cedar, now a fully grown male bobcat, had begun to change. He started venturing to the far edges of the enclosure, sniffing the fencing with increasing frequency. He paced in longer, more deliberate lines. His yowls at dusk grew deeper, echoing off the pines like declarations. There was restlessness in his body, a longing too primal to be ignored. It was time. Eva, Lucas, and Michael stood before the tracking monitors in silence. For weeks, they'd watched Cedar display all the signs of a maturing male ready to claim territory. The question was no longer if he could survive outside, but when to let him try. "I don't think he'll ever leave unless we make him," Eva said, her voice soft but steady. "As long as Willow's here, he'll stay." Michael didn't answer at first. He was staring at a still image on the monitor, Cedar lying beside his mother beneath a snow-dusted cedar tree, his massive body curled gently around hers like a shield. "He's ready," Lucas added, almost reluctantly. "It's her he's not ready to leave." Eva looked toward Michael. "And maybe she's not ready to let him go either. But we don't get to wait for perfect. Nature never does." Michael exhaled. "Then we give him the best start we can." Preparations were made quickly. A release point was selected, a remote section of the Kootenay National Forest, over 50 miles away. Far enough to prevent a return, but close enough to mirror his native terrain. The spot bordered 3 other known bobcat territories, which meant opportunity and danger. Cedar was fitted with a lightweight GPS collar. The process was delicate, and he growled low as the tranquilizer was administered. He didn't understand, couldn't. But his amber eyes, even heavy with sedation, searched the room one last time before flickering closed. Willow watched from a distance. Though no human could say for sure, there was something unspoken in her posture that morning, a stillness more resigned than calm. She didn't follow him to the gate, nor cry out. She simply lay beneath the same cedar tree, eyes tracking the transport truck as it rumbled away. The release site was silent. The back of the crate dropped with a soft thud, and for a moment Cedar didn't move. Then his head rose. He sniffed the air. Snow clung to the tips of his ears. Slowly, he stepped forward, paw by paw, until he reached the forest floor. He turned once, briefly, looked straight at the team, and then he vanished into the trees. No sound, no struggle, just the soft rhythm of 4 paws reclaiming a world that had always been waiting. Eva stood for a long time, eyes fixed on the horizon. "He'll be okay," she said, more to herself than anyone else. Michael lowered his camera. "He's already more than okay," he murmured. "He's free." The quiet that follows. In the weeks after Cedar's release, Whisper Hollow changed again. Without her son's constant presence, Willow moved slower, rested longer. The staff noticed her routines became more deliberate. She would bask in the late morning sun atop a broad, flat boulder, one Cedar had often chosen for his naps. She still hunted small prey when her body allowed, but the center ensured she never went hungry. Yet it wasn't her physical condition they worried about. It was her solitude. But Willow never appeared lost. She didn't cry out for him. She didn't pace the edges of the enclosure. She simply lived. With dignity. With grace. She would rise at dawn, stretch beneath the frosted tree line, and make her rounds, limping but strong. Sometimes she would sit perfectly still for hours, golden eyes half closed, tail flicking only occasionally. And when the wind picked up from the northwest, bringing in the sense of faraway trees and snow-covered ridges, she would lift her head, inhale deeply, and seem to listen. Perhaps to nothing. Or perhaps to him. Michael returned to visit her often. He'd sit in the quiet observation tower, camera in his lap, simply watching. He'd once feared that letting Cedar go would break Willow, that the bond between them had become her lifeline. But now he understood something deeper. Her love had never been about keeping him. It had been about preparing him. And in that, she had succeeded. GPS data confirmed Cedar's survival. After several weeks of roaming, he claimed a territory roughly 20 square miles wide near the Montana-Idaho border. Camera traps captured images of him, muscular, alert, moving with confidence. Once, a grainy video showed him trailing a female bobcat in mating season. Another, taken months later, revealed two tiny shapes following behind her. His offspring, perhaps. The circle had continued. Whisper Hollow had grown quieter, but it had never grown sad. Because it wasn't just a sanctuary for two bobcats anymore. It had become a symbol. Schools took field trips to learn about predator rehabilitation. Wildlife researchers cited Cedar's case in papers about emotional intelligence in solitary species. And visitors often paused at the enclosure's edge, standing in reverent silence as Willow lay on her sun-drenched boulder. Sometimes she'd glance at them. Sometimes she'd yawn and close her eyes. And sometimes, when the sun hit her fur just right, Michael could swear she shimmered like firelight, something untamed, something eternal. She had given everything she had. And in return, she got to keep something few creatures in the wild ever do. Peace. When the wild touches the world. The story of Willow and Cedar didn't stay confined to the forests of Montana. What began as a quiet act of rescue rippled outward in ways no one could have anticipated. Michael's photographs, raw, intimate, and breathtaking, were published in a feature article titled, "The Wild That Wouldn't Let Go." It went viral within days. The image of Cedar curled beside his wounded mother on the cold roadside became a symbol of devotion, resilience, and something deeply human in the wild. People around the world responded. Letters arrived at the rescue center from as far as Germany, Brazil, and Japan. Children sent hand-drawn bobcats with captions like, "Real heroes have paws," and "Cedar stayed, so should we." Donations flooded in, enough to expand Whisper Hollow into a full-scale rehabilitation complex. Solar-powered observation stations, an on-site veterinary wing, and expanded enclosures for other injured predators were built within a year. But it wasn't just money. It was mindset. Conservation groups began re-evaluating how they approached rehabilitation, not just from a survival standpoint, but from an emotional one. Eva was invited to speak at conferences. Her case study on Cedar's behavior challenged long-held assumptions about emotional detachment in felines. New training protocols were developed nationwide that considered trauma bonding and psychological well-being alongside physical healing. Even the Montana Department of Transportation took notice. Following public outcry, they launched a Safe Crossings campaign, installing wildlife overpasses and motion-triggered warning systems in high-traffic corridors near habitats. Willow's near-fatal injury sparked real legislative change. And Whisper Hollow became more than a sanctuary. It became a story people told. about love that doesn't waver, about wildness that still feels, about the quiet, powerful legacy left behind when a mother refuses to give up, and a son refuses to let go. Love that echoes in silence. On the 3rd anniversary of that foggy morning on Skolkoho Road, Michael stood once more at the edge of Whisper Hollow. The enclosure was quiet, bathed in the soft light of a spring sunrise. Willow, older now, her coat tinged with silver around the muzzle, lay peacefully atop her favorite sun-warmed rock. Her eyes opened slowly as Michael approached the viewing platform. She looked toward him, then beyond him, toward the horizon. "She's still watching for him," Michael whispered, more to himself than anyone else. But he knew better. Cedar had not returned, nor had they expected him to. He was wild now, independent. The GPS collar had stopped transmitting a year ago. Its battery faded long after researchers confirmed he'd successfully mated and fathered at least one litter. He had become what Willow had always wanted him to be, free. Yet in every tree he once climbed, in every trail Willow still wandered, his memory lingered. Michael published his photojournal, Between Two Trees, shortly after Cedar's collar went dark. In it were not just the images that made headlines, the roadside moment, the tranquilized farewell, the first steps into Whisper Hollow, but also the quiet ones, Cedar pressing his paw to the glass that separated him from his mother. Willow curled protectively in the snow. The two of them silhouetted against the fence line, looking outward together. The final page bore no caption, only a single photo, Willow alone, eyes closed in the morning sun. It was a portrait of peace, not loss, because theirs had never been a tragedy. It had been a transformation. Michael's words in the preface resonated around the world. We call them wild, but sometimes they love better than we do. Fiercer, quieter, more completely. Cedar never asked for recognition. Willow never sought sympathy. They simply lived, and in doing so, reminded us what it means to love without needing to own. Today, visitors to Whisper Hollow walk a small trail that loops the enclosure. Along the path stands a stone marker, modest and smooth, nestled beneath a tall cedar tree. It reads, "For those who stayed when it was easier to run." On the wind, sometimes, there's a sound, soft, like a purr or a whisper. Not a call for help, but a reminder that love, real, enduring love, is its own kind of wilderness. And in that wilderness, two bobcats left behind a legacy no one expected. A lesson, a healing, a home. In the story of Willow and Cedar, we find more than a tale of survival. We discover a profound truth about love, resilience, and letting go. Willow teaches us that real strength isn't in how fiercely we hold on, but in how selflessly we prepare others to face the world without us. Cedar reminds us that loyalty and love are not limited to words or species. They're choices, made again and again, even when no one is watching. In life, we all face moments of separation, of stepping into the unknown, of trusting that what we've given is enough. Whether you're a parent, a mentor, a friend, or someone still healing from loss, know this: the love you give doesn't vanish. It echoes in the lives you've touched. At Paw Prints Stories, we believe every animal tale holds a mirror to our own lives. If this story moved you, let it be a challenge, not just to feel, but to act, to love more deeply, to let go with grace, and to leave behind something better than what you found.